In the sun-scorched plateau of western Texas, where the Davis Mountains cast long shadows across isolated ranches, sits Thunderbolt Stables. What the Sierra Sonora Cartel saw as a simple target, a peaceful horse breeding operation run by a 58-year-old woman, would become their gravest miscalculation. They mocked her fancy show ponies, sneering at what they assumed were pampered thoroughbreds. They didn't know these horses were elite military assets with over 2 decades of Special Forces cavalry combat experience. They didn't know that Sarah Reynolds had spent 28 years training the most sophisticated mounted warfare units deployed in modern combat. By the time they realized their error, it was already too late. This is the story of how a retired cavalry instructor, her 7 combat-seasoned warhorses, and a network of veteran riders brought down one of Mexico's most ruthless cartels. When the last rays of sunlight painted the desert sky in brilliant shades of crimson and gold, Sarah Reynolds stood at her stable doors, watching her property come alive with evening activity. Her weathered face bore the marks of countless missions, but her steel-gray eyes remained razor-sharp, missing nothing. Through her high-powered binoculars, she spotted a dark SUV creeping along the mountain access road, marking the 4th such. Citing this week in her detailed logbook, her phone buzzed. Captain Michael Chen, her former second-in-command. "Sarah, you seeing what I'm seeing? Black Suburban, tinted windows, 3rd pass since Monday." She kept her eyes on the vehicle while responding. "Yeah, they're getting bolder. Sierra Sonora's pushing north, taking over ranches for distribution. Points, 5 properties hit last month. Let them come," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far worse odds. "All they'll see is an aging woman with her precious show horses." Michael's tone grew serious. "These aren't local thugs, Sarah. They're organized, well-funded, and they don't take rejection well." Sarah set down her coffee, her expression hardening as she watched Phantom, her lead stallion, alert to the distant vehicle. The massive black horse's ears pricked forward, his posture shifting subtly from relaxed to combat-ready. "Neither do I." Moving to the main arena, Sarah gave a series of subtle hand signals. 7 horses emerged from various points around the property, their movements precise and coordinated. Phantom led the group, followed by Storm, Thunder, Lightning, Shadow, Ghost, and Whisper. Each animal moved with the calculated precision that came from years of specialized military training. Captain James Cooper's police cruiser kicked up dust as it approached the stable yard. He stepped out, watching the horses execute a complex series of formations. "Still keeping them sharp, I see, though some might say it's excessive for a breeding operation." Sarah allowed herself a slight smile. "Good thing they're not just breeding. Stock. Got some news you should hear," Cooper continued, his expression grave. "Had visitors in town asking about local ranches, Mexican accents, designer suits, fake business cards, claiming to be agricultural investors." Sarah nodded, already knowing where this was heading. "Maria Gonzalez's place got hit last night. Nothing stolen, but her fences were cut. They're testing response times." "They'll test mine next," Sarah concluded, her mind already formulating contingency plans. "Want me to station deputies out here?" Cooper offered. "No," she replied. "Better, if they think I'm vulnerable." The sheriff shook his head. "You're playing a dangerous game, Sarah." "Not playing," she corrected him. "Just waiting." After Cooper left, Sarah began her evening routine. To any observer, it would appear to be standard ranch work. Feeding horses, checking fences, maintaining equipment. But there was nothing standard about how Phantom constantly patrolled the perimeter, how storm melted into shadows at the slightest. Unusual sound, how thunder and lightning maintained overlapping fields of vision from elevated positions. The horses weren't ordinary either. Each responded to silent commands, moving with purpose, their extensive training evident in every precise movement and alert stance. Mid-afternoon, a pickup truck slowed near her front gate, two men inside taking photos with their phones. "Hey, lady," one called out in heavily accented English. "Nice collection of show ponies you got there." Sarah tipped her hat politely, but said nothing. The men laughed and drove away. Her phone buzzed again. "Michael, they made contact, didn't they? Testing your reaction." "Let them test," Sarah replied calmly. "They'll see exactly what I want them to see." She ended the call and turned to her horses. Ghost had already moved to a concealed position, tracking the departing vehicle. Phantom and Shadow awaited commands, their training evident in their stillness. "Almost time," Sarah murmured, patting Thunder's muscular neck. "Almost." As evening approached, Sarah reviewed her security footage. The SUV had made 9 passes today, different vehicles but same cartel. They were establishing patterns, looking for weaknesses. She switched to her thermal cameras, a necessary precaution these days. Everything appeared normal, but Sarah knew better. The cartel was watching, planning, thinking they'd found an easy target. Before turning in, she made one final check of her property. The horses had already taken up their night positions. Positions that looked random but provided complete coverage of every approach. Phantom stood alert in the main paddock, ready to respond to any disturbance. Sarah checked each horse's tactical gear, equipment that looked like standard tack to the untrained eye. In her office, she opened a locked cabinet and pulled out a familiar file. Inside were photos, maps, and intelligence reports. Everything. Michael had sent her about the Sierra Sonora cartel's operations. "You boys think you found an easy mark," she said to herself, studying a surveillance photo of cartel Lieutenant Diego Ramirez. "You're about to learn differently." Outside, her horses maintained their watch, their military training invisible but ever present. Thunderbolt Stables appeared peaceful in the moonlight, but it was anything but defenseless. The trap was set. Now they would wait. The next morning brought an unsettling discovery. Sarah found fresh tire tracks near her back fence line. Someone had been there during the night. She knelt to examine the tracks, her trained eye noting their depth and pattern. Phantom appeared at her side, nostrils flaring. The horse's behavior changed instantly, body tensing. "Found something interesting, boy?" Phantom led her to a small electronic device hidden in the brush, a surveillance camera poorly concealed. "Amateur work," Sarah muttered, leaving the camera in place. "Let's give them something to watch." She spent the morning running her horses through basic dressage routines, nothing that would raise suspicion to the watching eyes. They were just well-trained show horses, nothing more. Dr. Rachel Martinez's truck pulled up the driveway for the monthly veterinary check. She was one of the few who knew the truth about Thunderbolt's residents. "How are our veterans doing today?" she asked, grabbing her medical kit. "Alert. Found some new friends this morning," Sarah responded, showing her photos of the tracks. Rachel's expression turned serious. "The cartel getting bolder?" "They're watching the ranch now." They walked to the main paddock where the horses waited. Rachel began her examination of Phantom, her movements careful and practiced. The horse remained perfectly still, military discipline evident. "You know," she said, checking Phantom's teeth, "most vets don't have to sign military non-disclosure agreements to treat show horses. Most show horses haven't served 3 tours in Afghanistan." Sarah replied quietly. A vehicle appeared on the road. The same black Suburban. Sarah and Rachel continued their work, appearing not to notice, but Storm had already moved to a concealed position, tracking the vehicle's movement. They're getting closer, Rachel observed, moving on to examine Shadow. Testing response times. And what will they find? Sarah smiled slightly. Exactly what I want them to find. The Suburban stopped, two men stepping out, pretending to check their engine while watching the ranch through cameras disguised as phones. Rachel finished her examination of the horses and moved to her truck. Your horses are in perfect health. As usual, she said loudly, playing along. Just regular show horses, right? Just earning their keep, Sarah replied at the same volume. The men by the Suburban were joined by a woman, Isabella Reyes, though Sarah didn't know her name yet. She was taking notes, studying the ranch's layout. Sarah's phone vibrated. Michael. Sarah, that woman on the road. She's Cartel intelligence. Isabella Reyes, ex-military herself. Finally, Sarah responded, someone who might appreciate what they're really looking at. This isn't funny, Sarah. She's good at what she does. So am I. After Rachel left, Sarah began afternoon training. To the observers, it looked like simple dressage practice. Horses performing collected movements and precise transitions. But each movement was calculated, practiced, part of a larger plan. Storm suddenly froze, ears pricked toward the tree line. Sarah spotted it too, movement where there shouldn't be. Someone on foot trying to get closer. She gave a subtle hand signal. Thunder and lightning shifted position, creating natural sight barriers. Through her peripheral vision, Sarah watched the intruder work his way closer to the fence line. Young, inexperienced, sloppy, probably new Cartel muscle trying to prove himself. The horses executed their protocol perfectly. Phantom circled wide, cutting off the retreat path. Shadow moved in silent parallel to the intruder. Storm maintained overwatch from elevated ground. Sarah continued working with Ghost, appearing oblivious. The intruder reached the fence, pulled out wire cutters. That's when Phantom appeared, silent as a ghost, directly behind him. The man turned, faced with 200 pounds of combat-trained warhorse. I wouldn't, Sarah called out casually. He's not big on strangers. The intruder found himself surrounded, thunder and lightning having closed the trap from behind. Storm watched from higher ground as Sarah approached on whisper, looking every bit the simple horse trainer despite the tactical precision of the response. Lost something? She asked. My dog ran away, the man stammered in heavily accented English. I was looking. No dogs out here, Sarah replied, her tone friendly, but her eyes hard. Just horses, and they don't like trespassers much. The man backed away slowly, hands raised. The horses maintained their positions, herding him toward the road. Tell your friends, Sarah called after him. My horses work security. They're very good at their jobs. The man practically ran to the waiting Suburban. Isabella Reyes watched. The whole scene, her expression calculating. She recognized training when she saw it. As the vehicle sped away, Sarah gave another hand signal. The horses resumed their positions, everything looking normal again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. They'll be back. Counting on it, she replied. That evening, Sarah reviewed her security footage. Isabella Reyes had spent 3 hours observing the ranch. She'll have noticed things regular thugs wouldn't. The horses' precise movements, their coordinated responses, their tactical positioning. Good. Time they learned who they were dealing with. She spent the night preparing. Tomorrow wouldn't be about showing weakness anymore. Tomorrow, they'd start to understand exactly what Thunderbolt Stables really was. And its defenders were ready. Pre-dawn darkness blanketed Thunderbolt Stables when the first silent alarm triggered, known only to Sarah and her horses. 4 figures moving along the eastern fence line, professional this time, no sloppy footwork or obvious approach. Sarah watched through her thermal imaging system. The intruders were well equipped, moving with military precision. Isabella Reyes had trained them well. "Let's show them what real training looks like," she whispered to Phantom, who stood alert. Beside her, a single hand signal sent thunder and lightning to their positions. The other horses remained still in their paddocks, but their stances changed subtly, ready. The intruders cut through the fence with specialized tools. Quick, quiet, efficient. They believed they'd found a blind spot in the ranch's security. Sarah let them think that for exactly 40 seconds. Her phone vibrated. "Michael. We've got movement at Gonzalez's place too," he whispered. "They're hitting multiple ranches tonight. Maria okay?" "Sheriff Cooper's got deputies there, but Sarah, they sent their professionals to you." "Good." The intruders reached the first outbuilding. That's when Sarah initiated the response. A series of whistles, too faint to be heard at distance, set. Her plan in motion. Shadow emerged from the darkness behind the intruders, silent, invisible, until he was right there. The first man turned, reaching for a weapon, but Storm was already flanking from the left. Phantom held the high ground, cutting off any retreat to the fence. "Evening, folks," Sarah called out, riding Ghost at a casual pace. Whisper followed, completing the encirclement. Little late for a trail ride. The intruders froze, finding themselves caught in a perfect tactical trap. Their training showed. They recognized the formation, the positioning, the precision. "These aren't show horses," one muttered in Spanish. "No," Sarah replied in the same language, her accent perfect. "They're not." Headlights appeared on the road, the black Suburban. Isabella Reyes stepped out, assessing the situation with professional interest. "Ms. Reynolds," she called out, "I hope my colleagues aren't disturbing your evening." "Not at all," Sarah responded. "My horses enjoy the exercise." Isabella walked closer, stopping at a respectful distance. Her eyes took in every detail, the horses' positioning, their stances, Sarah's relaxed but ready posture. "Beautiful animals," she said. "Military trained, I assume. Afghanistan or Iraq?" "Both," Sarah confirmed. "Different tours. And you already knew that, didn't you, Ms. Reyes? Ex-military intelligence tends to notice these things." She smiled, appreciating the revelation that Sarah knew her background. "You've been well briefed, Ms. Reynolds." "So have you," Sarah replied. "But not well enough." Isabella's smile faded slightly. "Our organization has a business proposition. For you." "Not interested. You haven't heard the offer. Don't need to." "Your 4 friends can leave the way they came," Sarah continued. "I'd prefer not to have to repair that section of fence again." Isabella studied her, recalculating. "You're making a mistake, Ms. Reynolds. We're not your typical criminals. No, you're not. You're professionals. So are we." The 3 intruders backed away slowly, weapons still holstered. They recognized the danger they were in. One wrong move, and the horses would react. "This isn't over," Isabella said. "I know," Sarah replied. "Tell Mr. Ramirez when he makes his next move, he should remember something." "What's that?" "These horses don't just look dangerous, they're combat veterans, and so am I." Isabella returned to her vehicle, the 3 intruders following. As they drove away, Sarah gave another series of hand signals. The horses maintained their defensive positions, now watching for a potential second team. Her phone buzzed again. Michael. "That was too easy," he said. "They were testing your capabilities." "I know. They'll come back with a better plan. The FBI can put surveillance on your ranch." "No," Sarah replied. "Let them think I'm alone. Out here, it's better that way." Dawn approached as Sarah repaired the cut fence. Maria Gonzalez drove up in her truck, looking worried. "They hit my south pasture," Maria said. "Cut fences, spooked the cattle. Deputies ran them off." "They'll be back, Sarah. These aren't regular rustlers. They're organized, well-funded." "I know," Sarah responded. "Keep your family close tonight. Things are going to escalate." After Maria left, Sarah gathered her horses. The morning sun revealed fresh tire tracks, shell casings from the intruders' abandoned surveillance position, signs of their practiced approach. "They're studying us now," she told her companions. "Really studying us. Time to show them what we can do." The horses took up new positions, combat formations disguised as regular patrol routes. Tonight was just the beginning. The cartel now knows they're facing professionals. The next move will be serious. Thunderbolt Stables stands ready. The trap is set. Let them come. Morning brought unwelcome news to Thunderbolt Stables. Sheriff Cooper's patrol car kicked up dust as it raced up the driveway, his expression grim. "They burned down the Wilson place last night," he announced before Sarah could speak. "Family's okay, but the message is clear." Sarah continued brushing lightning, her movements deliberate. "How far?" 3 miles south. Sarah, they're working their way up the valley. Systematic. Storm approached the fence line, ears pricked forward. A convoy of black SUVs appeared on the horizon, moving with purpose. "Right on schedule," Sarah muttered. Cooper reached for his radio, but Sarah shook her head. "Let them come." The convoy stopped at her gate. 5 vehicles, professional security formation. Diego Ramirez stepped out of the central SUV, impeccably dressed despite the desert heat. Isabella Reyes flanked him, along with a hulking figure Sarah recognized from Michael's intel as Carlos Montoya. "Ms. Reynolds," Ramirez called out. "I hope this isn't a bad time." "It's always a bad time for property developers," Sarah replied, continuing to brush lightning. Ramirez smiled. "All business. May we come in? I believe we can help each other." "Gates open, but only you 3. Your gunmen stay in their cars." Ramirez nodded appreciatively, noting the tactical awareness. He, Reyes, and Montoya approached on foot. The horses took up strategic positions, invisible to untrained eyes, but creating perfect fields of fire. "Beautiful animals," Ramirez observed. "Military, yes, like their master." "Just show horses now," Sarah replied. "Like their master." "No," Montoya spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly soft. "These horses have seen combat. I know that stance." "What do you want, Mr. Ramirez?" Sarah asked directly. "Good. Direct," he responded. "We're businessmen, Ms. Reynolds. This valley is inefficient. Small ranches struggling to survive. We offer infrastructure, protection, prosperity. By burning down the Wilson place? Regrettable. Some people need stronger persuasion." Sarah finally turned to face them fully. "And what kind of persuasion did you have in mind for me?" Isabella stepped forward. "We've researched you, Ms. Reynolds. 30 years military service, special operations, the best mounted warfare instructor in the program. Your skills are wasted here. My skills are exactly where they need to be. We're offering $7 million for the ranch, Ramirez stated flatly, plus a consulting position. Your expertise would be valuable to our organization. Sheriff Cooper shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Sarah noted how Montoya's hand never strayed far from his concealed weapon. Not interested. Ms. Reynolds, Ramirez's tone hardened slightly. Perhaps I'm not being clear. This valley will be modernized. The only question is whether you benefit from the process or... He let the threat hang. Storm snorted softly, not at the visitors but at movement in the brush. Sarah spotted them immediately, tactical teams moving into position using the conversation. As cover, call off your men, Mr. Ramirez, Sarah said quietly, before my horses decide they're a threat. Ramirez blinked, genuinely surprised. Isabella Reyes looked impressed despite herself. How did you... Your men are good, Sarah replied, but my horses are better. Much better. Montoya spoke again. The horses already have targeting solutions, on all 6 of them. Perfect positioning to cut off vehicle escape routes. He shook his head in admiration. This isn't a ranch, it's a fire base. Last chance, Ms. Reynolds, Ramirez said. Say 7 million, plus guarantees of safety for you. And your son. Sarah's expression darkened. Leave Michael out of this. Michael Chen, FBI agent currently investigating our operations, Ramirez continued. Children should be careful in such dangerous professions. Before anyone could react, Phantom materialized beside Ramirez, teeth inches from his throat. Thunder and lightning had Montoya and Reyes covered. The other horses moved with practiced precision, blocking the sight lines of the hidden tactical team. That sounded like a threat, Sarah said calmly. I don't like threats. Ramirez raised his hands slowly, real fear flickering in his eyes. An observation only. We respect family. Good. Then respect this. My horses don't just look dangerous. They've killed better men than your thugs. Now get off my ranch. This isn't over, Ramirez said, retreating slowly. No, Sarah agreed. It's just beginning. The convoy departed, taking their hidden tactical team with them. Sheriff Cooper let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. They'll be back with more men. I know, Sarah checked her phone. Multiple missed calls from Michael. And next time they won't play nice, Sarah. I should warn you, Victor Salazar's been asking questions at the county office, looking into your permits. The corrupt building inspector. Let him look. They're trying to come at you legally too. Smart. Sarah nodded, watching the dust cloud disappear. They still think this is about the ranch. Let them. Her phone buzzed again. Michael, Mum, we've got problems, big ones. Ramirez isn't just trying to take the valley. They're building something big. How big? I'm on my way. You need to see this. Sarah gave the all-clear signal to her horses, but they maintained combat readiness. They sensed it too, the calm before the storm. Thunderbolt Stables had just become ground zero in a war nobody was ready for, except perhaps one old soldier and her extraordinary horses. Michael arrived at Thunderbolt Stables as sunset painted, the sky blood red. He carried a thick file folder and a grim expression. Phantom escorted him from his car to the house, standard protocol now, even for family. They're not just taking ranches, Mom, he said, spreading satellite photos across the kitchen table. They're building an empire. The images showed construction sites scattered across northern Mexico, each perfectly positioned along smuggling routes. Sarah studied them with practiced eyes. Distribution hubs. More than that, look at the blueprints Victor Salazar approved last week. Michael produced county documents, plans for massive agricultural processing facilities along the valley. The dimensions made Sarah's jaw tighten. These aren't processing plants. No, Michael confirmed. They're fortresses. Underground storage, reinforced walls, surveillance systems. They're building a network that'll make border enforcement impossible. A sharp whistle from outside, Storm's alert signal. Sarah moved to the window, Michael close behind. Dr. Martinez's truck approached, driving erratically. Something was wrong. Thunder and lightning took defensive positions, while Sarah and Michael rushed to help. "The water," Rachel gasped. "Check the water supply." Sarah's expression hardened. She gave a hand signal, and the horses immediately moved to guard the ranch's main water tank. "They tried to poison your horses," Rachel continued, accepting Michael's help to stand. "I found traces in Maria's cattle troughs. Came straight here." Sarah collected water samples while Michael helped Rachel. Inside, Phantom maintained overwatch, his training evident in his focused scanning of the perimeter. "Found it," Sarah called out. "Traces in the main line, professional work." "I've got a hazmat team on standby," Michael said. "But Mom, this means they've got someone inside the water district." "Or they own someone there," Sarah finished. Her phone buzzed. "Maria Gonzalez. Sarah, they're here, dozens of them. They're taking the cattle." Gunfire erupted in the background. Sarah was already moving. Michael grabbed her arm. "Mom, I'll get tactical teams to Gonzalez's place now." "I've got my own team." 3 sharp whistles brought all 7 horses to attention, fully tacked and ready. They fell into assault formation, a pattern practiced countless times, but never used here until now. "Mom, wait for backup." But Sarah was already mounting Phantom, her movements fluid with decades of practice. "They want to see what these horses can really do? Let's show them." She rode out with thunder and lightning following. The other horses moving like shadows through the growing darkness. Michael watched them go, then made the call. "All units, shots fired at the Gonzalez Ranch, suspects armed and dangerous, mounted response unit en route." At the Gonzalez Ranch, chaos reigned. Cartel gunmen had surrounded the house, their vehicles, blocking escape routes. Cattle scattered in panic as more shots rang out. Then from the darkness a new sound emerged, the coordinated movement of trained horses approaching from multiple directions. The cartel members paused, suddenly uncertain. Ghost struck first, taking down a gunman without a sound. Shadow materialized from nowhere, disarming another. Storm coordinated from high ground, picking targets with tactical precision. Sarah appeared on Phantom, the horse moving with impossible stealth for its size. Whisper flanked from the opposite direction, cutting off escape routes. "Remember me?" Sarah called out. The gunmen turned, finding themselves caught in a perfect military-style ambush. Carlos Montoya stepped from behind a truck, raising his hands. Slowly. "Stand down," he ordered his men. "These aren't regular horses. You played your hand too early," Sarah said calmly. "Amateur mistake." Police sirens wailed in the distance. The cartel members retreated to their vehicles, but Sarah and her horses had already gathered evidence. Dropped weapons, vehicle plates, faces caught on the tactical cameras mounted on the horses' bridles. Michael arrived with his FBI team just as the last cartel vehicle disappeared. "Mom, are you crazy taking them on alone?" "Not alone," she patted Phantom's neck. "Never alone." Inside the Gonzalez house, Maria's family emerged, shaken but unharmed. Evidence of the attack was everywhere. Bullet holes, broken windows, scattered, shell casings. "They'll be back," Maria said, "with more men." "No," Sarah replied, studying tire tracks in the dirt. They'll try something different now, something bigger. Michael checked his phone, his expression darkening. Already happening. Victor Salazar just filed emergency condemnation orders on 7 ranches in the valley, including yours, Mom. They're done playing games. Good, Sarah nodded. Good? Because they're getting desperate. Time to call in some old friends. The horses maintained their defensive positions as night fell fully. They'd shown a fraction of their capabilities tonight, but the real battle was just beginning. Thunderbolt Stables wasn't just fighting for survival now. It was becoming the front line in a war nobody expected. Dawn hadn't yet broken when 3 unmarked vehicles arrived at Thunderbolt Stables. The horses reacted instantly, but Sarah gave the stand-down signal. She knew these visitors. Colonel Marcus Hayes stepped out first, followed by 2 other men in civilian clothes, all former special operations, all now working in private security, all men who had trained with Sarah and her horses. Still dramatic as ever, Sarah, Hayes said, eyeing the horses' defensive positions. Nice setup you've got here. Wish it was just for show, Marcus. Inside, Michael spread out his intelligence files while Rachel arrived with water analysis. Reports. Sheriff Cooper joined them bringing county maps and property records. The cartel's moving faster than we anticipated, Michael explained. They've already compromised key positions in local government. Victor Salazar's just the start. Hayes studied the satellite photos. These aren't just smuggling routes. They're building a forward operating base, military grade, using your ranches as cover. Your horses spooked them, one of Hayes's men noted. They're not used to professional opposition. That's why they're accelerating their timeline. Sarah watched through her binoculars as Isabella Reyes conducted surveillance from a distant hilltop. They're watching us, Hayes observed. Good, Sarah replied. Let them see exactly what we want them to see. While they planned, Dr. Martinez reviewed more lab reports. The chemical traces match shipments that came through Victor Salazar's approved agricultural import permits. We can prove he's working with them. Not enough to stop tomorrow's raid, Michael warned. They've got too much official cover. We don't want to stop it, Sarah explained, giving another series of signals. The horses shifted positions again, each move part of a larger strategy. Even Hayes, who had trained with them, was impressed by their precision. Jesus, Sarah, they're better than when they were in service. Had to be. Out here we don't have backup, just us. Sheriff Cooper arrived with fresh news. Just got word. County board's holding an emergency session. Salazar's pushing for immediate action on those condemnation orders. How long? Sarah asked. 3 days, maybe less. Hayes turned to his men. Get our legal team on it and contact our friends at the state level. This needs to slow down. A commotion at the front gate interrupted them. Maria Gonzalez arrived, in her truck, looking panicked. They're seizing the cattle, she shouted. Health department claims they're contaminated. They've got trucks coming tomorrow morning. The water poisoning, Rachel realized. They're using my report about their own sabotage against us. Smart play, Hayes admitted. Legal cover for illegal action, classic insurgency tactic. Sarah checked her security feeds. Multiple marked vehicles were now watching the ranch. Some carrying sophisticated surveillance equipment. Isabella Reyes's handiwork. They're mapping our capabilities. Let them, Hayes said. Sometimes the best defense is letting your enemy think they know your playbook. Michael's phone buzzed, his face paling as he read the message. Mom, they found something at the Wilson place after the fire. Underground. Rooms. Looks like the ones in their construction plans. They've already started building, Hayes concluded grimly. This isn't just about the ranches anymore. They're establishing a permanent presence, military-grade infrastructure disguised as agricultural development. Sarah turned to Hayes. Remember that operation in Kandahar? The one with the tunnel complex? Hayes grinned slowly. The one where we let them think they had us surrounded? Exactly, Sarah replied. Time to dust off that playbook. The horses perked up, sensing the shift in energy. These were combat veterans planning for war, and the horses remembered what that felt like. Michael, how many ranches are still holding out? 7, including yours and Maria's. That's our perimeter then. Marcus, can your men... Already on it. We'll have teams in place by nightfall. Sarah surveyed her property, mind already, formulating plans. The cartel thought they were dealing with a simple rancher protecting her land. Time to show them what a lifetime of military experience really means. Rachel, get those water samples to the state lab. Sheriff, we'll need your deputies coordinated with Michael's FBI teams. Maria, tell the other ranchers. Anyone who wants to resist, we'll help them. The sun climbed higher as plans took shape. Isabella Reyes watched from her hilltop position, noting every detail, but missing the larger picture. The cartel's sophisticated surveillance captured the movement of men and horses, but not their purpose. They thought they were watching an old soldier's last stand. What they were really seeing was the first phase of a counteroffensive planned by men and women who spent decades fighting smarter, more numerous enemies. Thunderbolt Stables was about to become a battleground, but this time the defenders were ready. Victor Salazar arrived at the county building in an expensive suit that seemed out of place for a local inspector's salary. His newly purchased Mercedes gleamed in the morning sun. Another red flag, Michael's FBI team noted carefully. Inside Thunderbolt Stables, Sarah and Hayes monitored the situation through Michael's courthouse contacts. The horses maintained their defensive positions, but something was different today. There was a new purpose to their movements, a combat-ready precision that spoke of coming conflict. Salazar's calling for immediate evacuation of all properties under investigation, Michael reported via secure line. Claims there's evidence of illegal modifications and environmental hazards. How long? Sarah asked, watching Phantom patrol the perimeter. Emergency order takes effect at midnight. They'll have police backing. Hayes checked his tactical tablet. My teams are in position at the other ranches. Maria's place is secured, and we've got overwatch on the Wilson property. Sarah studied her security feeds. Isabella Reyes's surveillance teams had multiplied, now watching from multiple angles. They were learning, adapting, trying to understand what they were really facing. Good, she said, let them watch. Phase 1 starts now. On her signal, the horses began executing their new protocols. To the observers, it looked like routine training, but every movement was carefully choreographed, feeding false information to the watching eyes. Storm took up positions that suggested defensive weaknesses. Shadow's patrol patterns indicated blind spots that didn't really exist. Thunder's reactions to perimeter alarms were delayed, purposefully sloppy. They'll think we're getting sloppy, Hayes noted, nervous about the legal pressure. Exactly, Sarah replied. Isabella Reyes is smart. She'll spot the pattern we want her to see. Rachel Martinez arrived with new water analysis reports, adding another layer to their strategy. The horses greeted her with their usual discipline, but she noticed the change in their bearing. State lab confirmed it, she said, spreading out documents. The water contamination wasn't just poison. They used agricultural chemicals, ones that would specifically show up in livestock testing. Setting up their seizure orders, Michael added. They've been planning this for months. A dust cloud approached from the south, Maria's truck moving fast. The horses reacted instantly, but Sarah gave the stand-down signal. "They're seizing the Wilson property," Maria called out as she parked. "County police, health department, everyone, they're not waiting for midnight." Sarah checked her watch. "Right on schedule." Michael's voice came through their secure channel. "FBI teams are monitoring. They'll document everything, but we can't intervene without cause." "We don't need to," Hayes said, showing them his tablet. "Look who just showed up at the Wilson place." The thermal imaging feed showed a familiar figure, Diego Ramirez himself, watching from a discreet distance as his plan unfolded. "Getting bold," Sarah noted. "Or getting desperate." "Both," Michael said. "Our pressure on their other operations is working. They need this distribution network operational fast." A series of sharp barks from Ghost drew their attention. The horse's posture was alert, but not aggressive. He'd spotted movement in the authorized pattern. More of Hayes's men arriving, disguised as agricultural workers. "Teams in position," Hayes confirmed, "including the night surprises we planted." Sarah gave a new series of hand signals. The horses adjusted their pattern subtly, now incorporating the new arrivals into their defensive web. To the watching cartel, it looked like regular ranch work. In reality, every movement strengthened their tactical position. "Victor Salazar just filed the emergency orders," Michael reported, checking his phone. "All 7 remaining ranches are cited for critical violations." "They're moving fast because they think we can't move faster," Sarah said. "Storm, show them pattern echo." The horse began a new patrol route, seemingly random but actually testing the surveillance team's positions. Every time they adjusted for a better view, they gave away more information about their locations. Thunder and lightning performed their own role, moving between specific points on the property. Their patterns suggested routine exercise, but they were actually marking sniper positions and escape routes. "Reyes's people are buying it," Hayes noted, watching their reactions. "They think we're scrambling, getting sloppy." A sheriff's deputy's car approached, one of Cooper's trusted men. The horses allowed him through without challenge, recognizing the arranged signal. "Sheriff sent me," the deputy reported. "Salazar's. Got county backing. They're planning to move at dawn, all properties simultaneously. Got state police support too." "Perfect," Sarah said, surprising the deputy. "Right when we want them." Rachel reviewed more lab reports, adding to their intelligence. Picture. The chemical traces match shipments that came through Victor Salazar's approved agricultural import permits. We can prove he's working with them. "Not enough to stop tomorrow's raid," Michael warned. "They've got too much official cover." "We don't want to stop it," Sarah explained. "We want them committed, all of them." Hayes grinned, understanding the strategy. "Classic military deception. Make them think they've got us running scared, reacting to their pressure." Maria looked confused. "But they're going to take the ranches." "No," Sarah said firmly. "They're going to try." She gave another series of signals. The horses shifted positions again, each movement part of a larger plan. Even Hayes, who trained with them, was impressed by their precision. "Jesus, Sarah, they're better than they were in service?" "Had to be. Out here we don't have backup. Just us." Michael's phone buzzed again with more intelligence updates. "Ramirez is calling in additional forces. They're not taking chances after what happened at Gonzalez's place." Good, Sarah replied. More resources committed, more evidence. Gathered. The sun began to set over Thunderbolt Stables. To the watching Cartel, it looked like a property preparing for its last night of freedom. Surveillance teams noted the apparently panicked activity, the seemingly disorganized movements of men and horses. Isabella Reyes watched from her hilltop position, something nagging at her professional instincts. Something about the patterns seemed too perfect, but Diego Ramirez wasn't interested in her doubts. Everything was proceeding according to plan. As darkness fell, Sarah gathered her allies for final preparations. The horses took up their night positions, each one carefully calculated to feed the cartel's assumptions. "Get some rest," she told them. "Tomorrow we show them what veterans can really do." The night settled over Thunderbolt Stables. On the surface, all was quiet. But beneath that calm, a battle plan months in the making was about to unfold. The cartel thought they were launching a decisive strike. They didn't realize they were walking into a trap laid by men and women who spent decades perfecting the art of strategic deception. And the horses, they were ready to show exactly why military training never really fades. The first hint of dawn barely touched the horizon when the convoy approached Thunderbolt Stables. 6 police cruisers, 4 county vehicles, and 3 black SUVs. Victor Salazar led the charge with state-issued evacuation orders. Sarah watched from her darkened stable office, Phantom at her side. The horse's posture was relaxed but alert. "Combat ready. Right on schedule," Hayes murmured, checking his tactical display. "Same at the other ranches. Synchronized operation." Michael's voice crackled over their secure radio, confirming multiple cartel vehicles moving into support positions. "They're staying back, letting the officials take point." "Smart," Sarah nodded. "Legal cover first." Through their thermal imaging, they watched the operation unfold. Police established a perimeter while county officials prepared to serve their papers, everything by the book on the surface. "Ms. Reynolds," Salazar's voice boomed through a bullhorn, "this is a legal evacuation order. You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises." Sarah gave a subtle hand signal. The horses shifted positions silently, implementing the plan they'd rehearsed for weeks. "They're watching every window," Hayes reported. "Tactical teams in covered positions, professional work." "Good," Sarah checked her watch. "Time to show them what professionals really look like." The first phase began so subtly that even the watching cartel nearly missed it. Storm, patrolling the north fence, appeared to stumble. His movements became erratic, disorganized. To Isabella Reyes's trained eye, it looked like the horse was losing discipline under pressure. "Target 1 showing weakness," her voice reported over cartel comms. "Possible gap in north coverage, exactly as planned." Shadow's patrol pattern shifted next, creating what appeared to be a blind spot in the ranch's defenses. Thunder's reactions to perimeter movements became delayed, suggesting confusion in the security system. "They're breaking down," Isabella reported. "The horses are losing their training under pressure." Diego Ramirez watched from his command vehicle, satisfaction evident. "Move in the secondary teams, use the confusion." But Sarah's veterans were just getting started. "Showtime," Hayes grinned, watching the cartel forces adjust their positions. "They're buying it completely." The police advanced with their orders, accompanied by county officials, professionals doing their jobs, unaware they were part of a larger operation. That's when Thunder and Lightning made their move. The horses appeared to panic, breaking from their paddock and creating chaos in the yard. It looked like a complete breakdown of discipline. To the cartel, it was confirmation that Sarah's defenses were crumbling. Their tactical teams began moving into what they thought were newly exposed positions. Pattern confirmed, Isabella reported. Security collapse spreading to all sectors. Sarah gave another signal. The next phase began. Suddenly, the ranch's floodlights blasted on, not in the obvious positions where the cartel placed their surveillance, but in carefully hidden spots that blinded their tactical teams. The horses' apparent panic turned into precise military movements, cutting off escape routes. The dogs revealed their true positions, not where the cartel had been watching all night, but in perfect flanking positions. Every apparent weakness transformed into a strength. It's a trap, Isabella's voice cracked with realization. Too late. Phantom, Ghost, and Storm launched coordinated attacks, not at the police or county officials, but at the cartel's hidden tactical teams. Years of military training became devastatingly apparent as they neutralized armed men with surgical precision. Jesus Christ, Salazar muttered, watching his carefully planned operation dissolve. Michael's FBI teams emerged from concealed positions, catching cartel members with weapons drawn. The local police, now realizing they'd been used as cover for criminal activity, quickly shifted allegiance. "Victor Salazar," Michael announced, approaching with his badge raised. "You're under arrest for corruption, conspiracy, and aiding a criminal enterprise." But the cartel wasn't finished. Ramirez ordered his reserve units forward, trying to salvage the operation. That's when they discovered Sarah's final surprise. The other ranches, supposedly vulnerable to coordinated raids, had transformed into ardent defensive positions. Hayes's men, disguised as agricultural workers, revealed themselves as veteran operators. "All units report," Hayes called over their tactical net. "Spring the trap." The valley erupted with coordinated action. Every apparent weakness became a killing zone. Every suspected gap in coverage became a perfectly prepared ambush point. "Pull back," Isabella ordered. But she'd lost control of the Z-Dur operation. The cartel forces, trying to retreat, found themselves caught in pre-sighted positions. Thunder and lightning demonstrated their true capabilities, providing mobile high ground for Hayes's marksmen. The horses worked with military precision, herding cartel members into prepared containment areas. Thermal signatures breaking south, Hayes reported. "They're running." "Let them," Sarah replied. "Phase 2 is waiting." Michael's FBI teams executed synchronized raids on the cartel's support positions. Every surveillance post, every hidden cache, every escape route, all compromised. "How long?" Isabella demanded over their captured comms. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the first day you watched my ranch," Sarah replied, knowing she was listening. "You saw what we wanted you to see, trained you to expect what we wanted you to expect." Ramirez's vehicle attempted to flee, but found its path blocked by Maria's. Cattle, strategically herded into position hours earlier. The horses converged, surrounding the car with tactical precision that would make any special operations team proud. "It's over, Mr. Ramirez," Sarah called out. "Your entire operation is compromised." Dawn fully broke over Thunderbolt Stables, revealing the scale of the operation. Cartel members in custody, corrupt officials in handcuffs, and evidence, mountains of evidence documenting their entire enterprise. The horses maintained their positions, their true capabilities now fully displayed, no longer pretending to be simple show horses. 28 years training cavalry units, Sarah told us, stunned. Salazar, as he was led away. Did you really think I'd forget how to run an operation? Michael approached, victory tempered with professional caution. Mom, we got the local network, but their main force is still out there. I know, she finished. Hayes checked his tactical displays. They'll regroup, come back harder. Let them, Sarah responded, watching her horses maintain their posts. We're just getting started. The sun climbed higher over Thunderbolt Stables. Phase 1 was complete, but everyone knew the real war was just beginning. The cartel had lost its element of surprise, its carefully constructed legal cover, its illusion of invulnerability. Now they'd respond with pure force, and Sarah Reynolds, her extraordinary horses, and her veteran allies would be ready. The trap had been sprung, but the battle for the valley was far from over. Diego Ramirez stood in his command center across the border, rage barely contained, as Isabella Reyes delivered her report. The wall of monitors showed the aftermath of their failed operation. Dozens arrested, millions in assets seized, their entire northern network exposed. How did we miss this? He demanded, hurling a coffee cup against the wall. How did one old woman and her horses outmaneuver our entire operation? Because we underestimated what we were dealing with, Isabella responded, spreading out new intelligence files. Sarah Reynolds isn't just a veteran. For 28 years, she was the military's premier mounted warfare specialist. Those aren't show horses, they're living weapons. At Thunderbolt Stables, Sarah and Hayes assessed their victories and losses. 2 of Hayes's men were wounded in the fighting. The cartel lost 15 operators, with 28 more in custody. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. They're calling in heavy assets, Michael reported, hanging up from his FBI contacts. Multiple vehicles crossing the border, military-grade weapons. They're done playing by the rules. Sarah watched her horses patrol the perimeter. The animals moved with combat-sharpened focus, aware that the real threat was still coming. Good, she said simply. Now we fight them on our terms. Sheriff Cooper arrived with troubling news. 2 of my deputies were ambushed. Professional hit, and Victor Salazar was found dead in his cell. They're cleaning house, eliminating loose ends. Classic cartel tactics, Hayes nodded. How's your family, James? Evacuated, FBI safe house. The sheriff looked haunted. Never thought I'd see guerrilla war in my county. Rachel's truck approached at high speed. The horses alerted but recognized her pattern. She barely waited for the vehicle to stop before jumping out, clutching documents. They're poisoning water supplies across the valley, she announced. Not just ranches, entire towns, creating a health crisis to justify federal intervention. Smart play, Hayes admitted. Force legitimate authorities to evacuate the area. Give them freedom of movement. Maria arrived next, her face ashen. They took my sons, left this. She handed Sarah a phone with a video playing. The message was clear: surrender the ranches or families start dying. Where? Sarah demanded. Warehouse complex south of Presidio. Michael checked satellite imagery on his tablet. Heavy security, at least 40 men. They're baiting us, Hayes warned. Try to split our forces. Sarah studied the video carefully, noting details others missed. The horses gathered around her, sensing her focus shift to combat planning. How long do we have? 24 hours, Maria replied. Then they start sending pieces, Sarah turned to Hayes. Your men up for a cross-border operation? Always. But the ranch will be vulnerable. They're counting on us diverting forces for a rescue mission. So we give them what they expect, Michael understood first. You're going to make them think the ranch is vulnerable again. Not think. Sarah gave a series of hand signals. The horses immediately began implementing new patterns. We show them exactly what they want to see. Forces divided, defenses stretched thin. And the rescue mission, Maria asked desperately, will be exactly what they don't expect. Sarah turned to Rachel. Those water supply documents, they prove official involvement? State level, she confirmed. Someone's being paid to look the other way. Perfect. Michael, get your FBI teams ready. When we move on all of them at once. Storm alerted to movement at the perimeter. Through their surveillance feeds, they spotted Cartel scouts testing their defenses again, already adapting, learning from their earlier failure. They're probing for weaknesses, Hayes observed. Let them look, Sarah replied. Show them what we want them to see. The horses adjusted their patterns subtly, creating apparent gaps in coverage. To the watching Cartel, it looked like their defenses were already stretching thin. Isabella Reyes, observing through high-powered optics, noted every detail. They're preparing for a rescue mission, she reported to Ramirez. Exactly as predicted. Excellent, Ramirez replied. Prepare the welcome party and move our main force into position for the ranch. But Sarah's veterans were already implementing their counter-strategy. While the Cartel watched their obvious movements, Hayes's men prepared hidden defensive positions. Throughout the valley, the horses conducted secret night training, mastering new tactical patterns. Rachel worked with county engineers, mapping the water system's vulnerabilities. If they trigger a crisis, she explained, we need to be ready to contain it. Sheriff Cooper coordinated with neighboring counties, establishing evacuation routes and safe zones. Whatever happens, he told Sarah, we'll keep civilians clear of the fighting. Michael's FBI teams moved into position, documenting evidence ready for mass arrests. When this goes down, he said, we take their entire network, not just the gunmen, the corrupt officials, the enablers, everyone. Thunder and Lightning underwent specialized night training, learning to operate in complete darkness. Their military background became evident in their precise responses, their instant reactions to combat signals. Maria struggled with fear for her sons, but Sarah's confidence steadied her. They think they know what we're capable of, the older woman assured her. They have no idea. Rachel began implementing her recovery plans, working with nature rather than trying to control it. The valley would heal, stronger for having faced this test. You've changed warfare, Isabella observed as she studied surveillance footage, shown everyone a new way of thinking about mounted combat. But Sarah knew differently. They hadn't changed warfare. They'd remembered something ancient, something that warriors understood centuries ago. The strongest weapon isn't the one you control, it's the one you trust. The defenders of Thunderbolt Stables stood together as darkness fell. The horses maintained their watch, not as weapons, but as partners. Michael reviewed the final reports. Multiple cartel operations exposed, corruption networks revealed, environmental threats contained. But the real victory was something less tangible. They'll remember this, he told his mother. Everyone will. Remember what happened when they underestimated a veteran and her horses. Let them remember, Sarah responded, watching her companions patrol their saved homeland. Let them understand what real partnership means. The night settled over Thunderbolt Stables. but its defenders remained alert, not from military training now, but from something deeper, something primal. The bond between warriors who'd faced the ultimate test together and emerged stronger. "Get some rest," Sarah told her human allies. "Tomorrow we start rebuilding." But the horses maintained their vigil, combat veterans who'd transcended their training to become something more. Not just military assets, not just weapons, but partners in the truest sense. The valley would recover, the land would heal, and Thunderbolt Stables would stand as a testament to what happens when you mock nature's deadliest warriors. Midnight approached at Thunderbolt Stables. The darkness felt alive with tension as thermal imaging captured the cartel's forces moving into position. 3 assault teams, heavily armed, approaching from different directions. Behind them, armored vehicles waited in reserve. "Contact," Hayes whispered into his tactical radio. "Multiple teams, professional spacing." Sarah watched through advanced optics as Isabella Reyes coordinated the operation from a mobile command center. She'd learned from their previous encounter, no more obvious tactics. "They're good," Sarah admitted, "but not good enough." The horses lay perfectly still in their hidden positions, years of combat training evident in their discipline. Thunder and lightning waited in a concealed stable, ready for rapid deployment. Michael's voice crackled over their secure channel. "FBI teams in position, but Mom, they've got someone inside the bureau. Our backup just got diverted." "Expected that," Sarah replied calmly. "Implement Protocol Echo." The cartel's first team reached the outer perimeter. Their thermal imaging showed empty defensive positions, exactly what they expected to find. Isabella Reyes frowned, studying the pattern. "Something's wrong," she reported to Ramirez. "This is too easy. We have 40 heavily armed men against a handful of defenders," Ramirez reminded her. "They're stretched thin, trying to mount a rescue operation. Proceed." The assault teams breached the outer fence with professional efficiency. No alarms, no response. They advanced toward the main buildings, confidence growing with each step. That's when Sarah sprung the first trap. Hidden sprinklers activated, but they weren't spraying water. Rachel's chemical cocktail filled the air, harmless, but matching the thermal signature of toxic gas. The cartel teams reacted instantly, donning gas masks, exactly as planned. "Masks on," Isabella ordered. "Push through it." The assault teams advanced through the chemical haze, their masks limiting visibility. They didn't notice that the ranch's defenders were operating without protection. "Phase 1 complete," Hayes confirmed. "Their infrared is compromised." The gas masks protected against chemicals, but did something else. They prevented the teams from detecting a crucial change in the wind. Storm gave a silent signal from his hidden position. Sarah spoke into her radio. "Execute." The real operation began. Phantom and Shadow emerged from concealed positions, but not where the cartel expected. They'd been hiding in plain sight, using Rachel's chemical formula to mask their thermal signatures. The first team never saw them coming. "Contact!" A cartel operator shouted, but his warning was cut short. The horses moved with military precision, disabling armed men with brutal efficiency. Isabella Reyes realized the trap too late. "Fall back, it's another setup." But the second trap was already sprung. The cartel teams retreated toward their pre-planned extraction points, only to find Hayes's men waiting. Years of special operations experience became lethally apparent. "They're boxing us in," Isabella reported, real fear in her voice. "The horses, they're herding us." Thunder and lightning burst from their concealment. Sarah and Hayes mounted for maximum mobility. The horses moved like shadows themselves, their military training allowing them to operate perfectly in darkness. "Sierra team, respond!" Isabella called. Silence. "Bravo team!" Nothing. Michael's FBI teams emerged from hidden positions, catching cartel members trying to escape. The entire valley had become a carefully prepared kill zone. "You watched us for weeks," Sarah's voice came over their captured radio channel. "Studied our patterns, but you forgot something crucial." "What's that?" Isabella demanded. "We were watching you watch us," Sarah replied. "Learning your playbook. Every move you planned, we prepared for." The night erupted in coordinated chaos. The horses demonstrated their full military capabilities, moving with lethal precision through the darkness. Thunder and lightning provided mobile high ground, allowing Sarah and Hayes to direct the operation with devastating effectiveness. But the cartel still had cards to play. "Bring in the heavy weapons," Ramirez ordered. Armored vehicles began moving forward, mounted guns sweeping the ranch. Sarah gave another signal. The horses disappeared into the darkness, but not in retreat. They were implementing their final training protocol, the one they'd perfected in Afghanistan. "Watch the flanks," Isabella shouted, remembering too late about Storm's position. The horse appeared like a ghost on the lead vehicle's blind side. Before the gunner could react, Storm had disabled him with terrifying efficiency. Phantom and Shadow coordinated their attacks on the other vehicles, creating chaos in the cartel's heavy weapons teams. "They're not just cavalry," Isabella realized. "They're a tactical unit." The horses demonstrated their own combat capabilities, providing Sarah and Hayes with impossible mobility through the battlefield. Every time the cartel adjusted their strategy, they found themselves outmaneuvered. Rachel's voice came over the radio. "Chemical analysis complete. These aren't just cartel forces, they're using military-grade equipment. U.S. military." "Someone supplying them," Michael confirmed. "High-level corruption." "Perfect," Sarah replied. "More evidence for later." The battle shifted as the cartel realized the extent of their trap. Isabella Reyes attempted to coordinate a fighting retreat, but found every escape route compromised. Hayes's men had turned the entire valley into an interlocking series of ambush positions. "Send in the backup." "Teams," Ramirez ordered. "Sir," Isabella reported, "there are no backup teams. They're all engaged, all compromised." Thunder and lightning circled the battlefield like avenging spirits, their specialized training evident in every movement. The horses worked in perfect coordination. Years of military operations transformed into a devastating display of tactical superiority. "Fall back to secondary positions," Isabella ordered, but it was too late. Michael's FBI teams had already secured those positions. The cartel forces found themselves with nowhere to retreat, their sophisticated equipment turned useless by the combination of mounted warfare and veteran experience. "It's over, Ms. Reyes," Sarah called out. "Your men are trapped, your equipment is compromised, and we have evidence of your entire operation." But Isabella Reyes was a professional. She knew something they didn't. "You think this is our whole force?" she asked, real confidence returning to her voice. "You think Ramirez wouldn't have a contingency?" As if on cue, new thermal signatures appeared on their sensors, many more. "Mom," Michael's voice was tight with concern, "we've got multiple vehicles crossing the border. Heavy armor. These aren't cartel forces." "No," Hayes confirmed grimly. "Those are military. Someone's called in their real backup." Sarah watched the new threat approach, but she wasn't worried. The horses maintained their positions, combat veterans ready for the next phase. "Good," she said simply. "Time to show them what we can really do." Thunderbolt Stables prepared for the next wave. The first battle was won, but the real war was about to begin. Pre-dawn darkness blanketed Thunderbolt Stables as Sarah Reynolds studied the approaching threat. A convoy of military vehicles crossing the border, heavy armor glinting in the moonlight. These weren't just cartel forces. Someone had called in serious reinforcements. "Mom, those are U.S. Army vehicles," Michael's voice crackled over the radio. "Someone's playing a dangerous game." Sarah's expression hardened. Corruption at the highest levels. She'd suspected it, but the confirmation still stung. "So are we," she replied grimly. The horses maintained their positions, combat-honed instincts keeping them still and silent. They could sense the impending clash, the air crackling with tension. Phantom and Shadow melted into the darkness, taking up hidden positions to flank the approaching force. Storm ascended to higher ground, ready to provide overwatch. In the command center, Isabella Reyes allowed herself a smile. "Your little trap was impressive," she told Sarah over the captured radio. "But you're outmatched now. Surrender and Ramirez might let you live." Sarah ignored the taunt, focusing instead on the tactical display. The military convoy was spreading, out preparing to encircle the ranch. "Hayes, they're trying to cut off our escape routes. Get your men into position Delta." The former Special Forces operator acknowledged, his team already moving. They'd prepared for this contingency, but the odds were stretching thin. Thunder and lightning shifted restlessly, armor-piercing rounds loaded. Rachel's voice cut through the tension. "Sarah, the FBI backup Michael requested just landed at the airfield, but they're 20 minutes out." 20 minutes against a heavily armed military force. Sarah took a breath, letting decades of training settle her nerves. "We'll make it 20. The first armored vehicle reached the shattered perimeter fence, heavy treads crushing the remnants. Turret-mounted weapons swiveled, seeking targets. Sarah gave a subtle hand signal. Phantom and Shadow launched from cover, precise movements honed by years of night operations. They closed on the vehicle's flanks, faster than the gunners could. Track-shaped charges, carefully placed hours earlier, detonated with devastating effect. The explosions ripped through the vehicle's wheels, shredding armor and disabling the behemoth. "First target neutralized," Sarah reported calmly, even as the night erupted in fury. The other vehicles opened fire, heavy-caliber rounds chewing through cover, but there was no panic in the defenders, only the disciplined reactions of veterans. They'd faced worse odds in the mountains of Afghanistan, the streets of Iraq. This was just another battlefield. Thunder and lightning poured fire into the convoy, armor-piercing rounds finding weak points with uncanny precision. Each horse carried a customized weapons package, turning them into mobile fire support platforms. Guided by their riders' expert hands, they delivered devastating volleys. Storm directed the battle from his high ground, thermal optics picking out priority targets. Hayes and his men launched their counterattack, disabling vehicles with rocket-propelled grenades and anti-tank missiles. The military force found itself pinned, caught between the veterans' interlocking fields of fire. In her command vehicle, Isabella Reyes realized they'd underestimated the opposition. These weren't just ranchers with a few tricks. They were soldiers, warriors, hardened by decades of battle. She barked new orders, trying to regain control, but Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "You're not fighting ranchers anymore," she declared over the open channel. "You're fighting the ghosts of every war we've ever won." As if to punctuate her words, thunder and lightning raked a troop transport with withering fire, sending soldiers diving for cover. The battle raged, minutes stretching into eternity. The ranch withstood assault after assault, defenders whittling the invasion down one vehicle at a time, but they could only weather the storm for so long. Casualties mounted, ammunition ran low, phantom and shadow harried the enemy, disappearing and striking like wraiths, but even their speed had limits. 15 minutes. Sarah knew they were on borrowed time. The military force was regrouping, preparing for a final push. In the distance, helicopter rotors thumped, airborne reinforcements. They had to hold out, just a little longer. Rachel's voice crackled over the radio, strained but determined. The airfield's under attack. Cartel forces trying to stop the FBI backup. We need support. Sarah gritted her teeth. The corruption ran deeper than she'd feared. Michael, take lightning and go. We'll handle things here. Her son hesitated, torn between duties. Mom! Go, she ordered. We'll hold the line. With a curt nod, Michael spurred lightning forward, the warhorses' strides eating up the ground. They'd make it to the airfield. They had to. 13 minutes. The military force surged forward, heavy vehicles spearheading the assault. Rocket artillery hammered the ranch's defenses, relentless and devastating. Hold positions, Sarah shouted over the din. Hold! Thunder reared up, unloading its heavy cannon into the lead tank. The armor-piercing round found the sweet spot between turret and hull, detonating inside with catastrophic results. The behemoth shuddered to a halt, smoke pouring from hatches, but there were more behind it, an avalanche of steel. 10 minutes. Hayes and his men fought like demons, improvised explosives taking out vehicle after vehicle. Sarah rode Phantom through the chaos, twin submachine guns spitting defiance. The warhorse moved with perfect symbiosis, anticipating her needs, shielding her from threats. They were one mind, one force, united by trust forged in countless battles. Storm continued his deadly overwatch. Special operation training guided every shot, sniper fire cutting down key targets. But attrition was taking its toll. Ranch defenders fell, veterans and horses alike. The airfield team wouldn't make it in time. They were out of options, out of backup plans. This was their last stand. 7 minutes. Thunder took a devastating shot, heavy cannon torn free. Sarah leaped clear as the horse crashed to the ground, shrapnel peppering its armor. Phantom pulled alongside, offering a mount. She swung aboard without hesitation. Seamless transition in the heat of battle. Reyes! Sarah called over the radio. You want this ranch? Come and take it! A primal challenge. One warrior to another. No more traps, no more tricks. Steel against steel, will against will. Isabella's reply was cold and sharp. With pleasure. The Cartel commander's vehicle surged forward, a custom-built war machine bristling with weapons. Heavy machine guns dueled with Phantom's cannons, armor-piercing rounds hammering both sides. Sarah felt the impacts, but her focus never wavered. They closed the distance. Phantom's speed matched against the armored car's power. Hoof and tread tore the earth, neither giving quarter. This was a battle as old as warfare itself. Mounted warrior against chariot, lancer against tank, timeless forces clashing. At the last moment, Sarah hurled a thermite grenade, the chemical mixture igniting. On impact, the searing heat gnawed through the vehicle's armor, finding fuel and ammunition. The explosion lifted the car into the air, flipping it like a toy. 3 minutes. Sarah leaped clear as the wreckage crashed down, Phantom dancing nimbly aside. Isabella emerged from the smoke and flames, battered but unbroken. She raised her weapon, aiming at Sarah's heart. "It's over," the cartel commander declared. "You fought well, but it's over." "Yes," Sarah agreed, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "It is." She looked past Isabella to the horizon. The cartel leader risked a glance, confused. Thunderbolt Stables was burning. Dead and dying littered the field. The military convoy stood poised for final victory. What did Sarah see? Then she heard it. Rotors, dozens of them. A formation of helicopters swept over the horizon. FBI Special Operations teams, called in by Michael's desperate gambit. They descended on the battlefield like avenging angels, miniguns roaring. The tide turned in a heartbeat. The cartel's once unstoppable advance turned into a wounded beast, snarling and confused, suddenly outmatched. "How?" Isabella demanded, shock overriding trained discipline. Sarah just smiled. "You fight for money. We fight for family." The words hung in the smoke-choked air as agents rappelled down, assault teams securing the shattered convoy. Sarah had one last duty to perform. She strode to where Thunder lay, the fallen warhorse struggling to rise. Phantom supported its companion, shielding the wounded warrior. Sarah knelt, removing the damaged armor, hands gentle. "Easy," she whispered. "Easy. You did good. You did so good." Thunder nickered softly, leaning into her touch. There would be time to mourn, to honor its sacrifice, but that time wasn't now. Sarah rose, face a mask of determination, and looked to the horizon. There were battles still to fight, a war to win. Thunderbolt Stables would rebuild. They'd train. New horses honor their fallen veterans, continue the mission, because some threats never quite end. And soldiers like Sarah Reynolds could never completely stop being soldiers. She swung up onto Phantom, tall in the saddle. Around them, the FBI team gathered. Michael, Hayes, Rachel, the remaining ranch hands. The battle had been long and brutal, the cost heartbreaking. But in that moment, as dawn peeked over the mountains and the smoke began to clear, one thing was evident. The cartel had picked a fight with the wrong ranch, the wrong soldiers, the wrong family. And now, everyone would know the price of that mistake. Sarah turned Phantom to the north, to the future, to the battles yet to come. It was, after all, what she'd trained for. Here is part 8 of the story, continuing from where part 7 left off, around 2,100 words in length. The sun climbed over the battle-scarred valley, illuminating the smoldering wreckage of the cartel's assault. FBI agents swarmed through Thunderbolt Stables, securing evidence, tending to the wounded, tallying the costs of the night's brutal clash. In the heart of the chaos stood Sarah Reynolds, unbowed and resolute. Beside her, Phantom maintained a protective stance, armor scored and battered but spirit unbroken. The warhorse had seen Sarah through countless battles, and this one would be no different. Together they surveyed the aftermath, taking stock of what had been lost and what had been saved. Michael approached, his own armor streaked with soot and blood. "The airfield's secure," he reported, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "We drove them back. But the cost..." He trailed off, gaze drawn to the fallen forms of ranch hands and horses alike. Sarah nodded, understanding the toll all too well. "They knew the risks," she said softly. "We all did, and we'll honor their sacrifice." Her eyes found lightning and storm, the wounded warhorses aiding the FBI teams, undaunted by their own injuries. "We'll rebuild, We always do. In the distance, Isabella Reyes sat in the back of an armored transport, hands cuffed, face a mask of defiance. She met Sarah's gaze, hatred smoldering in dark eyes. "This isn't over," the cartel commander called out. "You think you've won. You've just painted a target on your back." Sarah approached, footsteps measured and calm. "You came to my home," she replied evenly. "Threatened my family. Did you expect me to roll over, to give in?" She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "I've faced down warlords and insurgents, cartels and criminals. You're just one more name on that list." Isabella's snarl twisted into a mocking smile. "And you're just one more target. You have no idea how high this goes. You can't protect them all." Sarah straightened, eyes hardening. "I don't have to. They can protect themselves. And now the world knows what happens when you cross us." She turned away, leaving Isabella to the agents. There was work to be done, a ranch to rebuild, a mission to continue. Rachel fell into step beside her, holding out a sheaf of documents. "The evidence is damning," the doctor reported. "Corrupt officials, military involvement, all the way up to the state level. This is big, Sarah, bigger than we imagined." Sarah scanned the papers, mind already racing ahead. "Then we take the fight to them. We don't stop until we've rooted out every last trace of corruption." She knew it wouldn't be easy. The cartel's tendrils ran deep, their influence pervasive. But easy had never been part of the job description. Sheriff Cooper approached, his uniform torn and bloodied. "I've got reports coming in from across the county," he said grimly. "Retaliatory strikes, targeting anyone who stood against the cartel. They're lashing out." "Then we lash back," Sarah replied, steel in her voice. "We protect our own. We draw the line." She looked to Michael and Hayes, to the FBI agents and surviving ranch hands. "This is our home, and we'll defend it, whatever the cost." The group dispersed, each to their appointed tasks. Sarah swung up onto Phantom, the warhorse eager for the fight. They rode out to survey the damage, to rally the troops, to plan their next move. The battle had been won, but the war stretched ahead, long and bloody. As they crested a hill overlooking the valley, Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Incoming transmission," the operator reported. It's from Washington, the Attorney General's office." Sarah frowned, a flicker of unease running through her. Had their desperate gamble paid off, or had it painted an even larger target on their backs? She keyed the mic, voice steady. "This is Sarah Reynolds. Go ahead." The voice that responded was crisp, authoritative, with the weight of federal power behind it. "Ms. Reynolds, this is Attorney General Elizabeth Hawkins. I've been briefed on your situation." Sarah waited, sensing the hammer about to fall. "Your actions have uncovered a web of corruption that reaches to the highest levels of government," Hawkins continued. "The evidence you've gathered will be crucial in bringing these criminals to justice." A glimmer of hope sparked in Sarah's chest. They hadn't been abandoned. Their fight hadn't been in vain. "What do you need from us?" she asked, ready to do whatever it took. Hawkins' reply was direct and unflinching. "I need you to keep fighting," the Attorney General said firmly. "I need Thunderbolt Stables to be the beacon that rallies others to the cause. This corruption is deeply entrenched, and rooting it out will require a sustained effort. We need symbols, Ms. Reynolds, icons that the people can rally behind. That's where you come in." Sarah understood instantly. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were figureheads, standard-bearers in a larger war. It was a daunting prospect, but one she knew they had to embrace. "We won't let you down," she promised. "Thunderbolt Stables stands ready." As the transmission ended, Sarah looked out over the valley once more. The scars of battle were evident, but so too were the signs of resilience. Ranch hands working to repair fences, warhorses patrolling the perimeter, FBI agents coordinating with local law enforcement. They had taken the cartel's best shot and emerged unbroken, but Isabella Reyes's words echoed in her mind. They had painted a target on their backs. The corrupt officials, the compromised military units, the criminal organizations. They would all be gunning for Thunderbolt Stables now. They had become a symbol of resistance, and that made them a threat. Sarah knew they couldn't stand alone. They would need allies, partners in the fight. She thought of the other ranches in the valley, the local townspeople who had suffered under the cartel's grip. It was time to rally them, to forge a coalition of the willing. She spurred Phantom forward, the warhorse's hooves eating up the ground. They rode to the Gonzalez ranch first, then to the others, spreading the word, sharing the plan. Some were hesitant, scarred by their own losses, but others, those with fire still in their bellies, embraced the call. Soon a small army had gathered. At Thunderbolt Stables, ranchers, farmhands, locals with old hunting rifles and determined faces. They looked to Sarah for guidance, for leadership. She met their gazes, humbled by their trust. "The fight won't be easy," she told them plainly. "And it won't be quick. We're going up against money, power and corruption at every level, but we have something they don't. We have each other. We have our land and our way of life, and we have the truth on our side." The crowd murmured in agreement, resolve hardening. Michael and Hayes moved among them, organizing the volunteers into teams, assigning tasks and roles. Rachel tended to the wounded, human and equine alike, her medical skills a vital resource. Sheriff Cooper coordinated with the FBI, sharing intel and resources. As the day wore on and the preparations continued, Sarah found a moment to slip away. She rode Phantom to the crest of a nearby hill, looking out over the valley that had become their battlefield. The warhorse stood steady beneath her, ready for whatever came next. Sarah's mind drifted to the challenges ahead. There would be more battles, more losses, more sacrifices, but there would also be victories, large and small. They would chip away at the cartel's power structure, dismantle its network of corruption piece by piece. They would show the world that there were still those willing to stand against tyranny, no matter the odds. And through it all, Thunderbolt Stables would endure. The horses and humans who called it home would continue to train, to prepare, to hone their skills for the fights to come. They were soldiers, after all, serving a cause greater than themselves. Sarah reached down, running a hand along Phantom's armored neck. The warhorse nickered softly, a sound of trust and partnership that ran soul deep. Together, they had faced the horrors of war and emerged stronger. Together, they would face this new challenge, this new mission. The sun began to set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah turned Phantom back toward the ranch, back toward the waiting fight. The road ahead would be long and hard, but they would walk it together, one step at a time. Thunderbolt Stables had become more than just a ranch, more than just a home. It had become a symbol of hope, a beacon in the darkness. And Sarah Reynolds, veteran trainer, leader, would ensure that light continued to shine, no matter the cost. They rode into the gathering night, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The battle had been won, but the war stretched ahead, waiting, and Thunderbolt Stables would be ready to meet it, head on and unafraid. Dawn broke over Thunderbolt Stables, revealing a ranch transformed, where once stood only training grounds and horse pens. Now a small city of tents and makeshift shelters had sprung up, housing the volunteers who had answered Sarah's call. The air hummed with purposeful activity as the newly formed resistance prepared for the battles ahead. At the center of it all, Sarah and her core team huddled around a map of the region, planning their next moves. Red pins marked known cartel strongholds, blue ones indicating allies and potential resources. It was a daunting tapestry, but one they were determined to unravel. The Attorney General's office has promised support, Michael reported, tapping a stack of documents. Federal resources, intelligence sharing, even potential military backup if we can prove the need. Sarah nodded, eyes still on the map. We'll need all of that and more. The cartel's roots run deep. Cutting them out will take time and precision. Her gaze shifted to Sheriff Cooper. James, what's the word from the other towns in the county? The sheriff leaned forward, exhaustion lining his face. Most are scared, Sarah. They've lived under the cartel's thumb for so long they don't know any other way. But there are a few, like Oakhurst and Millfield, where the people are ready to fight back. They just need a leader. Then that's where we start, Sarah decided. We show them that resistance is possible, that they're not alone. She turned to Hayes, the former Special Forces operator, studying the map with a practiced eye. Marcus, I need you to train up teams, small units that can strike fast and hard. We'll need to hit the cartel where it hurts, disrupt their operations and supply lines. Hayes grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. I've got just the men for the job, and the horses. He glanced out the window to where thunder and lightning were being tended to, their wounds from the previous battle already healing. Never underestimate the value of shock and awe. Rachel cleared her throat, drawing their attention. I've been analyzing the chemical composition of the drugs the cartel's been pushing, she said, holding up a sheaf of lab reports. There are unique markers, compounds that could help us trace their manufacturing process. If we can locate and destroy those labs, we cut off their product at the source, Sarah finished, nodding approvingly. Good thinking, Rachel. Work. With Michael and his FBI contacts, see if you can narrow down some potential locations. As the meeting broke up and everyone hurried to their assigned tasks, Sarah took a moment to step outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. Phantom trotted up to her, armored flanks gleaming in the sunlight. The warhorse had become a symbol of the resistance, a reminder that even the most battle-scarred could still find the strength to fight. Sarah ran a hand along Phantom's neck, feeling the power and determination thrumming beneath the surface. We've got a long road ahead, old friend, she murmured, but we'll walk it together just like always. The horse nickered softly, pressing into her touch. Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet connection, drawing strength from the bond they shared. Then, with a deep breath, she turned back to the organized chaos of the ranch. There was work to be done. Over the next few weeks, the resistance began to take shape. Hayes and his team struck at cartel outposts and supply lines, using the speed and maneuverability of their warhorse units to hit hard and fast before melting away into the wilderness. Each successful raid bolstered the morale of the volunteers, showing them that victory was possible. In the towns and villages, Sarah and Sheriff Cooper worked to rally support, convincing the people that they had the power to stand up to the cartel's intimidation. It was slow, painstaking work, But gradually, more and more began to join the cause. Rachel and Michael, meanwhile, made progress on tracking down the cartel's drug labs. Using a combination of chemical analysis and good old-fashioned detective work, they narrowed down the possibilities to a handful of remote locations hidden deep in the mountains. "We'll need to hit them all simultaneously," Sarah decided when they brought their findings to her. "Prevent them from warning each other or shifting their operations." "That's a lot of ground to cover," Hayes pointed out, studying the map with a frown. "We'd be spreading ourselves thin, even with the new recruits." Sarah nodded, mind already working through the problem. "Then we bring in reinforcements. The Attorney General promised military support if we could prove the need. This is it." She turned to Michael, a plan forming. "Reach out to your contacts. Let them know what we're planning. We'll need precise strikes, coordinated with our ground forces. If we can take out these labs, we'll cripple the cartel's drug trade and free up resources for the next phase." As word spread of the impending operation, the energy at Thunderbolt Stables reached a fever pitch. Volunteers drilled and trained, honing their skills for the fight ahead. The warhorses too sensed the building anticipation, their steps a bit lighter, their heads held a bit higher. Sarah spent long hours poring over intel reports and satellite imagery, mapping out every detail of the plan. She knew the stakes were high. A single misstep could doom the entire operation and put lives at risk. But she also knew that this was their best chance to strike a decisive blow against the cartel's power structure. The night before the operation, Sarah found herself once again seeking the quiet solace of Phantom's company. The warhorse stood watchful and calm, a steady presence amidst the swirling chaos. Sarah leaned against his armored flank, drawing in a deep breath. "We've come so far," she whispered, more to herself than to the horse. "Farther than I ever thought. Possible, but the hardest part is still ahead." Phantom turned his head, nuzzling her gently. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the connection soothe her racing thoughts. "I keep thinking about all the lives on the line," she confessed. "All the people counting on us to get this right. It's a heavy burden." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah felt a wave of determination wash over her. This was the job, the calling that she had dedicated her life to, protecting the innocent, standing up to those who would prey on the weak. It was what she had trained for, what she had fought for all those years. With a final pat to Phantom's neck, Sarah straightened, squaring her shoulders. "But it's a burden we bear gladly," she said, voice ringing with conviction. "Because if not us, then who? We have the skills, the knowledge, the resources to make a difference. And that's exactly what we're going to do." The dawn of the operation broke clear and cold, a crisp wind whipping across the valley as the resistance forces assembled. Sarah stood at the head of the column, Phantom armored and ready at her side. Hayes and his team were mounted and armed, eager for the fight. Sheriff Cooper had his deputies and a posse of volunteer riders, grim determination etched on their faces. In the distance, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air, the military support Sarah had requested, ready to descend on the cartels. Drug labs with precision strikes. It was a formidable force, a testament to the alliances and relationships Sarah and her team had forged. As the order to move out rang across the assembled troops, Sarah felt a surge of pride and purpose. They were taking the fight to the enemy, bringing the battle to the cartel's very doorstep. It would be a hard-fought campaign, with no guarantees of success, but it was a fight they were ready for, a fight they believed in. With Phantom's reins in hand, Sarah led the charge. the thunder of hooves and the roar of engines filling the morning air. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles they might face, one thing was certain: Thunderbolt Stables and its allies would meet them head-on, united in their resolve to see justice done and peace restored to the valley. The road ahead was long, and the fight would be fierce. But in that moment, as the sun crested the hills and the wind whipped at her face, Sarah Reynolds knew they were riding towards something more than just another battle. They were riding towards hope, towards a future where the shadow of the cartel no longer hung over the land. And with that knowledge burning bright in her heart, she urged Phantom forward, ready to meet whatever lay ahead with courage, determination, and the unbreakable bonds of a family forged in the heat of combat. The war was far from over, but Thunderbolt Stables was on the march, and heaven help any who stood in their way. The strike on the cartel's drug labs was swift and devastating. Military helicopters descended from the sky like avenging angels, their guided missiles striking with pinpoint precision. On the ground, Sarah led the charge, Phantom surging forward as Hayes and his team fanned out to flank the enemy positions. The cartel fighters, caught off guard by the suddenness and ferocity of the assault, scrambled to mount a defense. But they were outmatched and outmaneuvered, their hasty fortifications crumbling under the onslaught of hooves and heavy weapons fire. Sarah rode at the head of the column, her rifle cracking as she picked off targets with practiced ease. Beside her, Sheriff Cooper and his posse pressed forward, their faces grim with determination. They had all suffered at the hands of the cartel, had all lost friends and loved ones to the violence and corruption. Now they fought for retribution, for a chance to reclaim what had been taken from them. As the battle raged, Sarah caught glimpses of her team in action. Hayes, leading a squad of mounted infantry, charging a machine gun nest with reckless bravery. Rachel, tending to the wounded even as bullets whizzed overhead. Michael, coordinating with the military to direct airstrikes and troop movements, and always, at the center of it all, the horses, Phantom, Thunder, Lightning, veterans of countless campaigns, their armor scarred but their spirits unbroken. They moved through the chaos with a sure-footed grace, responding to their riders' commands with almost uncanny precision. It was a testament to the bond between horse and human, a partnership forged in the crucible of combat. And as Sarah watched her mounted units work in seamless harmony, she felt a swell of pride and gratitude. These were more than just animals. They were comrades in arms, as essential to the fight as any human soldier. The battle raged for hours, the cartel fighters falling back in the face of the relentless onslaught. And as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, Sarah knew that victory was within reach. The drug labs lay in ruins, the enemy's supply lines severed. It was a crushing blow to the cartel's power structure, one that would take them years to recover from. But even as she savored the hard-won triumph, Sarah knew that the war was far from over. The cartel's leaders were still out there, no doubt already plotting their revenge, and there were other threats lurking in the shadows. Corrupt officials, compromised law enforcement, a web of deceit and intimidation that stretched far beyond the borders of their small valley. As the resistance forces regrouped and tended to their wounded, Sarah gathered her team for a debrief. "We struck a major blow today," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "But this is just the beginning. The cartel will retaliate, and we need to be ready." Hayes nodded, his face etched with the weariness of battle. "They'll come at us hard," he agreed. "We bloodied their nose, and they won't forget that anytime soon." Then we hit them harder, Michael chimed in, his eyes blazing with determination. We keep the pressure on, keep them off balance. We show them that we're not going away. Sarah listened to her team's input, her mind already racing ahead to the next phase of the campaign. They would need to consolidate their gains, to build on the momentum they had achieved today, but they would also need to adapt, to evolve their tactics to stay one step ahead of the enemy. We'll need intel, she mused, glancing at Rachel. The more we know about their movements, their plans, the better we can counter them. Rachel nodded, her mind already whirring with possibilities. I've got some ideas, she said. Chemical tracers, satellite imagery, maybe even some undercover work. We'll find a way. As the meeting broke up and the team dispersed to their various tasks, Sarah found herself once again seeking out the company of her equine partner. Phantom stood at the edge of the encampment, his armor battered but his eyes bright and alert. He nickered softly as Sarah approached, nuzzling her hand in greeting. "We did good today, old friend," she murmured, running her fingers through his mane. "But there's still so much work to be done, so many battles left to fight." Phantom snorted softly, as if in agreement, and as Sarah gazed out over the war-torn landscape, she felt a renewed sense of purpose settle over her. This was her calling, her duty, to stand against the darkness, to protect those who could not protect themselves. And with Phantom by her side, with her team at her back, she knew that she would never waver in that commitment. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The resistance forces moved from town to town, rooting out pockets of cartel influence and bolstering. Local defenses, they raided supply caches, disrupted smuggling routes, and gathered intelligence on the enemy's movements. And always, at the forefront of the action, were the horses. They served as scouts and messengers, as shock troops and distractions. They carried the wounded to safety and the fallen to their final rest. And in the quiet moments between battles, they offered comfort and companionship to their human partners. Sarah watched as the bond between horse and rider deepened with each passing day. She saw the way that Hayes's mount, a fiery chestnut named Blaze, would stand guard over him as he slept, ears pricked for any sign of danger. She noticed how Rachel's gentle grey mare, Mist, seemed to sense when the doctor was feeling overwhelmed, offering a soft nicker of encouragement. And she marveled at the way that Michael and his jet-black stallion, Shadow, moved as one on the battlefield, their every motion perfectly synchronized. It was a partnership born of trust and respect, a connection that transcended mere training or instinct. As the weeks turned into months and the resistance continued to grow, Sarah began to allow herself to hope. Hope that they could win this war, that they could build a better future for the people of the valley. Hope that the sacrifices they had made, the losses they had endured, would not be in vain. But even as that hope burned brightly, Sarah knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous. The cartel was wounded, but far from defeated, and there were other enemies lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. One evening, as she sat by the campfire with Phantom dozing at her side, Sarah received a disturbing report. From one of her scouts, a new player had entered the game, a shadowy figure known only as the Ghost, who was said to have ties to international arms dealers and terrorist organizations. "They say he's been hired by the cartel to take out the resistance," the scout reported, his voice tight with fear. "That he's brought in a team of mercenaries, ex-military types with advanced weaponry and training." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at the news. She had heard whispers of the ghost before, a ruthless assassin who struck without warning, leaving no trace of his passing. If he was now working for the cartel, it could spell disaster for the resistance. But even as the weight of this new threat settled over her, Sarah refused to give in to despair. She had faced long odds before, had stared down enemies that seemed invincible, and she had always found a way to prevail through grit and determination and the unbreakable bonds of family. "We'll find a way to stop him," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "We'll find a way to win this war, no matter what it takes." And with those words, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose settle over her. She would not rest, would not falter, until the valley was free from the grip of the cartel and its allies. She would fight with every ounce of strength and skill she possessed, would lead her team and her horses into battle with a fierce and unwavering resolve. For this was more than just a fight for territory or resources. It was a fight for the soul of the valley itself, for the right of its people to live free from fear and oppression. And as Sarah gazed out over the flickering flames of the campfire, she knew that there was no force on earth that could stop her from seeing that fight through to the end. The road ahead would be long and the battles would be fierce. But with Phantom by her side and her team at her back, Sarah Reynolds would face them all with courage, determination, and the unbreakable spirit of a true warrior. For in the end, that was what Thunderbolt Stables had always been about. Not just training horses or fighting wars, but standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. And as the night wore on and the stars wheeled overhead, Sarah knew that she would never stop fighting for that ideal. For the sake of her family, her horses, and the people of the valley, she would ride on into whatever challenges the future might bring.